My name is Linda, and I'm 32 years old. For most of my life, I thought being the dependable one in my family was something to be proud of. I had a successful marketing career, my own apartment, and what I believed was a close relationship with my parents and siblings. But sometimes the people who claim to love you the most are the ones who hurt you deepest. What happened at our family Thanksgiving gathering last year changed everything I thought I knew about my place in this world. Before I share what happened that night, let me know in the comments where you're watching from, and please hit that like button and subscribe for more real-life stories. You won't believe how this family dinner changed everything forever. Growing up as the middle child in a family of 5, I learned early that love came with conditions. My mother Margaret always had a special place in her heart for my older brother Dennis, who was 35, and my younger sister Karen, who was 28. Dennis was the golden boy who could do no wrong even when he dropped out of college twice and moved back home. Karen was the baby sweet and helpless who needed constant protection and support. Then there was me sandwiched between them trying to earn the same unconditional love they seemed to receive just by existing. My father Harold worked construction and came home tired every night, more interested in his beer and television than in connecting with any of us kids. But even his limited attention seemed to flow more naturally to Dennis and Karen. I remember my high school graduation when I was valedictorian. I gave the speech to 300 people talking about dreams and determination. My parents sat in the third row, but I watched my mother spend most of the ceremony whispering to my aunt about Dennis's latest girlfriend. When I walked across that stage to receive my diploma, I looked out into the audience and saw my father checking his watch. College was different. I earned a full academic scholarship to Ohio State, something that should have made any parent proud. When I called home with the news, my mother's first response was concern about how we'd afford Karen's cheerleading camp that summer without my part-time job contributing to the household. I studied marketing and communications, working 20 hours a week to pay for books and personal expenses while maintaining a 3.8 GPA. Meanwhile, Dennis bounced between community colleges and part-time jobs, always coming up with new business ideas that required financial help from our parents. Karen struggled through high school, and I spent countless hours tutoring her over the phone, helping her pass classes I'd aced years earlier. After graduation, I moved to Columbus and started working at a small advertising agency. The pay wasn't great initially, but I was determined to build something for myself. Even then, the phone calls came regularly. Dennis needed money for a security deposit. Karen's car broke down and she needed help with repairs. My parents' heating bill was higher than expected. Each time I found ways to help, sometimes eating ramen noodles for weeks to make my budget stretch. Slowly, my career began to take off. I switched companies twice, each time increasing my salary and responsibilities. I specialized in digital marketing campaigns for healthcare companies, and my work started getting recognition in industry publications. I bought my own car, furnished my apartment, and even started a small emergency fund. But my family's perception of me never changed. When I'd visit home, Dennis would joke about my little office job while discussing his latest scheme to start a food truck or landscaping business. Karen would roll her eyes when I mentioned work projects, more interested in talking about her social life and dating drama. My parents seemed to view my independence as selfishness, as if success meant I thought I was better than them. The irony was that the more successful I became, the more my family relied on me financially. When Dennis's business ventures failed, I was the one who helped him make car payments. When Karen got pregnant and her boyfriend disappeared, I helped cover her medical expenses. When my parents faced unexpected repairs to their roof, I quietly transferred money to their account and never mentioned it again. 3 weeks before Thanksgiving, I sat in my apartment staring at my phone, debating whether to attend our annual family gathering. My best friend Joyce had invited me to join her family's celebration instead, and the idea felt like a lifeline I desperately wanted to grab. "You know they're just going to treat you like the family servant again," Joyce said during our weekly coffee date. "Linda, you've got to stop setting yourself on fire to keep them warm." but something deep inside me, that little girl who still hoped for her mother's approval, convinced me to give them one more chance. Maybe this year would be different. Maybe they'd finally see how hard I'd worked, how much I'd achieved, how much I'd sacrificed for them over the years. I spent more money than I should have on preparation. I drove to the expensive wine shop downtown and bought a $60 bottle of Pinot Noir that the clerk recommended. I stopped at the florist and picked out a beautiful autumn arrangement with deep orange roses and golden chrysanthemums. At the bakery, I ordered my mother's favorite apple bourbon cake, the kind she always said was too expensive for regular occasions. The night before Thanksgiving, I carefully wrapped a small gift for each family member. For Dennis, a leather portfolio for his job interviews. For Karen, a spa gift certificate she'd mentioned wanting. For my parents, a framed photo of all of us from last Christmas, professionally restored and matted. The drive to my childhood home in suburban Ohio took 45 minutes through familiar streets, lined with similar ranch houses and brown lawns. Each mile brought back memories. The elementary school where I'd won the spelling bee 3 years running. The park where I'd taught Karen to ride her bike while my parents were at Dennis's baseball games. The library where I'd spent countless afternoons because home felt too chaotic for homework. I pulled into the driveway behind Dennis's truck, noting the new dent in the passenger door that probably represented another insurance claim he couldn't afford. Karen's minivan sat crooked across part of the lawn because parallel parking had never been her strong suit. Walking up to the front door, I could hear laughter and conversation through the windows. For a moment, I felt that familiar flutter of hope. Maybe they were happy. Maybe this gathering would be filled with genuine warmth and connection. My mother opened the door before I could knock, and her first words were about my appearance. "Linda, you look tired. Are you eating enough? You're so thin." She hugged me briefly, then immediately stepped back. "Oh, you're a little late. We were wondering if you'd changed your mind." It was 5:47. Dinner was supposed to start at 6. Inside the house smelled like turkey and stuffing, but also like the underlying mustiness that came from carpets that needed replacing and windows that rarely opened. Dennis sat in my father's old recliner, beer in hand, talking loudly to his new girlfriend Brenda about his plans to start a pool cleaning business in the spring. Karen was chasing her 2-year-old son around the coffee table while her husband Tom scrolled through his phone, apparently oblivious to the chaos. My father looked up from the television long enough to nod in my direction. "Linda, good you can help your mother in the kitchen." Not hello, not how was your drive, just an immediate assignment to my familiar role as family support staff. I set my gifts under the small artificial Christmas tree my mother put up every year in early November, then carried my wine and flowers to the kitchen. The counters were covered with dirty dishes and half-prepared food. My mother stood at the stove stirring gravy with one hand and checking the turkey with the other, stress lines etched deep around her eyes. "Can you finish the potatoes?" she asked without looking at me. "And maybe set the table. Karen's been dealing with the baby all day." I looked through the doorway at Karen, who was now sitting on the couch scrolling through her phone while her husband chased their son. But I tied on an apron and started mashing potatoes, falling back into the familiar rhythm of family gatherings where I worked while others relaxed. As I moved around the kitchen, I began to pick up fragments of conversation that made my stomach tighten. Through the thin wall between the kitchen and living room, I could hear my mother and Dennis talking in low voices during a commercial break. "Linda's situation is just getting worse," my mother was saying. "She's 32 and still single, living in that tiny apartment, spending money on expensive wine instead of saving for a house." Dennis laughed. "Maybe she should move back home, save some money. I keep telling her that marketing thing isn't a real career. She'd be better off learning a trade or finding a husband who can take care of her." I gripped the potato masher tighter, my knuckles turning white. A marketing thing. I'd just been promoted to senior marketing manager at a company that handled campaigns for 3 major hospital systems. My salary was higher than Dennis had ever earned in his life, and I'd been consistently employed while he bounced between jobs and failed business ventures. When I carried the bowl of mashed potatoes to the dining room table, Karen made her first dig of the evening. "Oh, Linda, you brought flowers again. You know Mom's allergic to chrysanthemums, right? Maybe next time just bring something practical." I'd been bringing flowers to family gatherings for 5 years. My mother had never mentioned any allergies, and she'd always seemed to appreciate them. But Karen's comment was delivered with that particular smile she'd perfected, the one that looked sweet while delivering small cuts. "I can put them in my car if they're a problem," I offered. "No, no, they're fine," my mother said quickly. "Karen, help your sister set the table." Karen sighed dramatically. "I've got to watch the baby. Tom's still trying to fix that work thing on his phone." So I set the table alone, arranging the good china my mother only used for holidays, folding napkins and placing silverware, while listening to Dennis describe his latest business plan to Brenda. This one involved buying damaged cars at auction and flipping them for profit, despite the fact that Dennis knew nothing about auto repair and had never successfully completed any business venture he'd started. When I rejoined the kitchen to help with final preparations, I tried to share some good news about my recent promotion. "Mom, I meant to tell you earlier I got promoted last month. I'm now senior marketing manager for the entire healthcare division." She glanced up from the turkey, then back down. "That's nice, honey. Can you check if the rolls are done?" "That's nice, honey." 4 words that somehow contained years of dismissal and indifference. When Dennis had gotten a job stocking shelves at a hardware store, my mother had called everyone she knew. When Karen had passed her driving test on the 3rd try, we'd had a celebration dinner. My promotion, representing years of hard work and professional growth, warranted the same response as checking on dinner rolls. During dinner preparation, I overheard my father talking to Tom about family finances. "Between you and me, it's getting harder to keep up with everything. Dennis is still figuring things out, and Karen's got the kids to think about. Sometimes I wonder what we'd do without Linda helping out." The comment should have felt like recognition, but the way he said it made my contributions sound like charity rather than family support. As if I were some distant relative doing them a favor instead of their daughter who'd been quietly covering their emergencies for years. My nephew toddled into the kitchen and tugged on my leg. "Aunt Linda play." I knelt down to his level, smiling at his chubby face and bright eyes. "Hey there, buddy. What do you want to play?" Before he could answer, Karen appeared in the doorway. "Come on, sweetie. Don't bother Aunt Linda. She's busy helping Grandma cook." She scooped him up and carried him away, leaving me kneeling on the kitchen floor, arms empty. The message was clear. Even my attempts to connect with the children were seen as interruptions rather than loving gestures from their aunt. As we finally gathered around the table, I looked around at my family and felt a familiar sadness settling over me. I'd driven 45 minutes, brought expensive gifts and food, and spent 2 hours helping prepare dinner. In return, I'd received criticism about my appearance, dismissal of my career achievements, and relegation to servant status while others relaxed. But I told myself this was just how families worked. Everyone had different roles, different expectations. Maybe I was being too sensitive, wanting more recognition than I deserved. Maybe this was simply love expressed in practical ways rather than words. I had no idea that the evening was about to explode in ways that would change everything forever. Dinner started normally enough, with my father saying a brief grace and my mother fussing over whether everyone had enough food. But I should have recognized the warning signs in the undercurrents of conversation and the way certain topics kept surfacing. Dennis dominated most of the discussion, describing his pool cleaning business idea with the enthusiasm of someone who'd never had to follow through on actual business planning. "The startup costs are minimal," he explained to Brenda, who nodded politely while cutting her turkey. "Just a truck, some basic equipment, maybe $5,000 to get started." My father leaned forward with interest. "That sounds reasonable. Much better than that food truck idea." Karen jumped in with support. "Dennis has always been good with his hands. Remember how he fixed the fence in high school?" I remembered that fence repair. It had fallen down again within 6 months, and my father had to hire a professional to rebuild it properly. But Dennis's failures were always reframed as learning experiences, while any struggles I'd faced in building my career were seen as evidence that I'd chosen the wrong path. When Brenda politely asked about my work, I tried again to share something positive. I just finished a campaign for Cincinnati Children's Hospital that increased their organ donation registrations by 30%. It's been really rewarding to work on something that directly impacts patient care. Dennis snorted. Organ donations. That's pretty morbid, isn't it? Karen wrinkled her nose. I don't like thinking about that stuff. Why can't you work on something happy like wedding planning or baby products? My mother looked uncomfortable. Linda's always been drawn to serious things. Even as a child, she preferred documentaries to cartoons. The way she said it made my interests sound like character flaws, rather than signs of depth or compassion. I felt heat rising in my cheeks, but tried to keep my voice level. Actually, it's one of the most meaningful projects I've worked on. We helped connect donors with families who desperately needed transplants. Tom looked up from his phone for the first time all evening. Don't you feel weird about profiting off people's medical problems? The question hit me like a slap. I help save lives. How is that profiting off medical problems? I'm just saying. Tom shrugged, already looking back at his phone. Seems like taking advantage of people when they're vulnerable. The conversation moved on before I could respond, flowing back to Dennis's business plans and Karen's complaints about the cost of daycare. I sat there feeling like I'd been judged and dismissed for caring about meaningful work, while Dennis's history of failed ventures was celebrated as entrepreneurial spirit. As my mother brought out the apple bourbon cake I'd ordered, the conversation shifted to family finances in a way that made my skin crawl. Karen mentioned struggling with Christmas shopping, and my father suggested they scale back expectations this year. Everyone's dealing with money stress, my mother said, glancing around the table. It's not like we all have high-paying careers. The comment was clearly directed at me, as if my financial stability was somehow unfair or unearned. Dennis nodded in agreement. Some people get lucky with office jobs, but the rest of us have to work for a living. Work for a living. As if my 60-hour weeks, my continuing education, my client presentations, and strategic planning weren't work. As if the money I'd quietly contributed to this family over the years had materialized out of thin air. Brenda shifted uncomfortably in her seat, clearly sensing tension she didn't understand. My nephew started fussing, and Karen immediately stood to tend to him, using the distraction to avoid the increasingly pointed conversation. My father set down his coffee cup with more force than necessary. The problem is that families don't stick together like they used to. Everyone's out for themselves these days. He was looking directly at me when he said it. Me, who had never missed a family gathering. Me, who had helped cover their emergencies without being asked. Me, who had sacrificed my own financial goals to make sure they stayed afloat during difficult times. Some people think success means forgetting where you came from. My mother added her voice, carrying that particular tone she used when she wanted to sound philosophical while delivering criticism. I felt something shifting inside me, a tectonic plate of patience that had been bearing weight for too many years. What exactly do you mean by that? The question came out sharper than I'd intended, cutting through the ambient conversation and drawing everyone's attention. Dennis stopped mid-sentence in his explanation of pool chemical logistics. Karen paused with a spoonful of cake halfway to her mouth. Even Tom looked up from his phone. My mother's face flushed slightly. I just think some people in this family could be more generous with their good fortune. More generous. The words hung in the air like an accusation. More generous than paying Dennis's car insurance for 6 months. More generous than covering Karen's emergency room visit when her son had pneumonia. More generous than the $2,000 I'd quietly transferred to my parents' account when their furnace died last winter. I think I've been plenty generous, I said quietly. Dennis laughed, the sound harsh and dismissive. Come on, Linda. You act like buying expensive wine and flowers makes you some kind of saint. This isn't about wine and flowers. No, it's about attitude, Karen chimed in, apparently emboldened by Dennis's support. You've been acting superior all evening, like you're doing us some big favor by being here. Superior. for helping in the kitchen while they watched television, for bringing thoughtful gifts while they showed up empty-handed, for trying to share meaningful work while they dismissed it as unimportant. My father cleared his throat, a sound that usually signaled the end of uncomfortable conversations. But instead of changing the subject, he decided to weigh in with his own perspective. Linda, your mother and I appreciate everything you do, but this family isn't about keeping score. We all contribute in different ways. Different ways. Dennis contributed failed business plans and requests for money. Karen contributed drama and childcare demands. I contributed actual financial support and emotional labor, but somehow we were all equal in our family contributions. The unfairness of it hit me like a physical blow. For 32 years, I'd tried to earn their love and respect through achievement, through sacrifice, through being the dependable one who never asked for anything in return. And this was what I had to show for it. Resentment disguised as concern. Dismissal disguised as family harmony. My mother leaned forward, her face taking on that expression she wore when she was about to deliver what she considered tough love. Linda, the truth is sometimes you make this family feel like we're a burden to you, like you're just tolerating us. The accusation was so far from reality that I actually laughed, a short, bitter sound that surprised everyone, including myself. A burden. You think I see you as a burden? Well, don't you? Dennis asked. You never just visit anymore. It's always some big production bringing expensive stuff, acting like you're doing us favors. I stared at him, this 35-year-old man who lived in our parents' basement, who had never successfully maintained a job for more than 18 months, who had borrowed money from me as recently as last month for his truck payment. What favors exactly do you think I'm doing? The question seemed to confuse him. I don't know, just the way you act. Like you're better than us. How do I act like I'm better than you? Karen jumped back into the conversation, her voice rising with indignation. You always have to mention your job, your apartment, your promotions. It's like you're rubbing it in our faces that you have money and we don't. Money they'd borrowed. Promotions I'd earned through years of hard work while they criticized my career choices. An apartment I'd furnished carefully and alone while they lived with family support. I mention my job because it's my life, I said slowly. The same way you talk about your children or Dennis talks about his business ideas. That's different, my mother said firmly. Children and dreams are what family talks about. Work is just work. Work is just work. The career I'd built from nothing, the expertise I'd developed, the recognition I'd earned in my field, reduced to just work, while Dennis's fantasies about pool cleaning were treated as legitimate dreams worthy of family support. I felt the last thread of my patience beginning to fray. So my work doesn't matter, but Dennis's theoretical businesses do. At least Dennis is trying to build something for himself instead of just making money off other people's problems, Karen said hotly. There it was again, the accusation that my meaningful work was somehow exploitative, while Dennis's pattern of failure was noble effort. I looked around the table at these people I'd loved and supported for my entire adult life and suddenly saw them clearly for the first time. They weren't grateful for my help. They resented it. They didn't see my success as something to celebrate. They saw it as evidence that I thought I was better than them. And worst of all, they genuinely believed that I was the problem in this family dynamic. My mother's voice cut through my realization like a blade. Linda, I think you need to understand something. This family has carried you your whole life, and now you're acting like you don't need us anymore. Carried me. The words hit like a physical blow. This family had carried me. Carried me how? I asked quietly. Emotionally, financially, in every way that matters. She continued, her voice gaining strength as she warmed to her theme. We've always been here for you, supporting your choices, even when we didn't agree with them. Supporting my choices. Like when they'd complained about my college major, my career path, my decision to live independently, my choice to remain single and focus on building my life. You've supported me financially, I repeated slowly. Of course we have, Dennis said impatiently. Family supports family. That's how it works. I stared at him, wondering if he genuinely didn't remember the car payments, the insurance premiums, the emergency loans that were never repaid. Or if he'd simply rewritten history in his mind to make himself the generous one instead of the recipient. I'm trying to understand, I said carefully. How specifically has this family supported me financially? The question seemed to frustrate my mother. Linda, this isn't about specific transactions. It's about being part of a family that cares about each other. But you just said you've supported me financially. I'm asking how. Silence fell over the table. Dennis fidgeted with his napkin. Karen busied herself with cleaning cake crumbs off her son's face. My father studied his coffee as if it contained fascinating secrets. Finally, my mother spoke again, her voice tight with irritation. This is exactly what I'm talking about. You're turning this into some kind of accounting exercise instead of recognizing that family is about more than money. You brought up financial support, I pointed out. I'm just asking for clarification. Stop being so literal, Karen snapped. Mom's talking about emotional support, about being there for you when you needed us. When I needed them. I tried to think of times when I'd needed them and they'd been there. The times I'd called upset about work stress and been told I was being too sensitive. The times I'd shared relationship disappointments and been told I was too picky. The times I'd struggled with loneliness and been advised to lower my standards and settle down. I appreciate the emotional support, I said quietly. But I'm still confused about the financial support you mentioned. My mother's face was beginning to flush with anger. For heaven's sake, Linda, we raised you, didn't we? We fed you and clothed you and put a roof over your head for 18 years. That's financial support. 18 years ago. She was talking about basic parental obligations from when I was a child, using them to justify her claim that this family had carried me financially. Mom. That's called being a parent. That's not the same as supporting an adult child financially. Don't you dare lecture me about being a parent, she said sharply. We sacrificed plenty for you kids, and we didn't keep track of every penny like some kind of loan shark. Loan shark. For asking about the financial support she'd claimed they'd provided. For wanting clarification about her accusations. Dennis leaned forward, his face serious. Linda, you're being really selfish right now. This family has always been there for you, and now you're acting like you don't owe us anything. Owe them. The word hung in the air between us, clarifying everything. They believed I owed them something. My success, my money, my gratitude, my subservience. They believed that by raising me, they'd purchase the right to my adult earnings and my eternal deference. What do I owe you? I asked. Respect, my mother said immediately. Appreciation for everything we've done for you. And what have you done for me as an adult? The question seemed to infuriate her. We've loved you unconditionally, which is more than you can say about your attitude toward this family. Unconditionally. Love that came with constant criticism, financial expectations, and demands for gratitude. Love that required me to minimize my achievements and subsidize their failures. If you love me unconditionally, why does my success bother you so much? Your success doesn't bother us, Dennis said impatiently. Your attitude about your success bothers us. What attitude? Like you're better than us, Karen said again. Like you've outgrown your family. I looked around the table at their faces, all focused on me with varying degrees of frustration and anger. They genuinely believed that my quiet pride in my achievements was arrogance. They honestly thought that my financial independence was a betrayal of family values. They truly felt that I was the selfish one in this dynamic. And suddenly, with crystalline clarity, I understood exactly what was happening. This wasn't about love or family loyalty. This was about control. As long as I remained grateful and submissive, accepting their version of reality where I was the lucky one who'd somehow stumbled into success, they could continue to benefit from my achievements while maintaining their sense of superiority. But the moment I showed any sign of recognizing my own worth any indication that I might stop accepting their narrative, I became a threat that needed to be neutralized. My mother's voice cut through my realization like a final nail in the coffin of my illusions. Linda, I'm going to be blunt with you. Sometimes this family feels like you're just dead weight we carry around out of obligation. Dead weight. The words hit me like a physical blow, driving the air from my lungs and leaving me speechless. Dead weight. After years of financial support, emotional labor, and unconditional presence in their lives, I was dead weight they carried out of obligation. The room went completely silent. Even my nephew stopped babbling in his high chair. Dennis stared at my mother as if he couldn't believe she'd actually said it. Karen's face went pale. My father set down his coffee cup and looked away, but my mother continued, apparently oblivious to the devastating impact of her words. We keep including you, keep trying to make you feel part of the family, but you just take and take without giving anything back. Take and take. I, who had given thousands of dollars and countless hours of unpaid emotional labor to this family. I, who had sacrificed my own financial goals to ensure their stability. I, who had never asked them for anything except basic respect and recognition. Something inside me shifted, a tectonic plate of tolerance finally cracking under the weight of years of accumulated hurt and disappointment. I felt a strange calm settling over me, the kind of clarity that comes when you finally stop fighting reality and accept it completely. I looked at my mother, this woman who had given birth to me and raised me, and then spent my entire adult life trying to diminish me, and I smiled. Good, I said quietly. Then drop me and see who really falls. The effect of my words was immediate and electric. My mother's face went from flushed to completely white in the span of a heartbeat. Her mouth opened and closed without sound, like a fish gasping for air. Dennis straightened in his chair, suddenly alert. Karen actually dropped her fork, the clatter echoing in the absolute silence that had fallen over the room. What did you say? My mother whispered. I said good. If I'm dead weight, you're carrying out of obligation, then drop me. Let's see who really falls when you do. My father cleared his throat uncomfortably. Linda, your mother didn't mean it that way. I turned to look at him, this man who had spent my entire life letting my mother speak for the family while he hid behind his newspaper and television shows. How did she mean it, Dad? He shifted in his seat, avoiding my eyes. She's just frustrated. We all are. This conversation got out of hand. No, I said calmly. This conversation got honest. For the first time in 32 years, Mom said exactly what she thinks about me. I'm dead weight this family carries out of obligation. That's not what I meant, my mother said quickly, but her voice lacked conviction. Then what did you mean? She struggled for words, her face cycling through expressions of panic and anger and confusion. I meant that sometimes you make us feel like we're not important to you anymore. By having a successful career, by acting superior about it. I felt that strange calm deepening, like sinking into warm water. All the years of walking on eggshells, trying to make myself smaller so they could feel bigger, attempting to hide my achievements, so they wouldn't feel threatened. All of it had been pointless. They were always going to resent my success because it challenged their narrative about themselves. I want to make sure I understand this correctly, I said slowly. You believe that I think I'm superior to you because I have a good job and my own apartment. It's not about what you have, Dennis said desperately. It's about how you act about what you have. How do I act? Like it makes you better than us. I leaned back in my chair, studying his face. Dennis, when was the last time you congratulated me on anything? The question seemed to catch him off guard. What do you mean? I mean, when was the last time something good happened to me and you expressed genuine happiness for my success? He stared at me blankly. I don't know. I guess I don't think about it that way. When I got promoted last month, what was your reaction? Silence. When I bought my car 2 years ago, what did you say? More silence. When I got the healthcare marketing contract that I was really excited about, how did you respond? Dennis looked increasingly uncomfortable. I don't remember specific conversations. I do. You said marketing was just pushing products people don't need. You said I was lucky to find something that paid well for such easy work. I didn't mean anything bad by that. What did you mean? He struggled for an answer. I guess I just meant that some people have easier paths than others. Easier paths. You think my career has been easy. Easier than physical labor. I stared at him. This 35-year-old man who had never held a job for more than 18 months, who had never completed any project he'd started, who had never taken responsibility for any of his failures. How would you know you've never done the work I do? I know it's not physical. You're right. It's mental and emotional. It requires education, training, creativity, problem solving, client management, and about 60 hours a week of focused effort. But you're right that it's not physical. Karen jumped in, apparently sensing that Dennis was losing ground. Linda, you're missing the point. We're not attacking your job. We're talking about your attitude. What about my attitude bothers you specifically? You always have to be right. You always have to prove that you know better than everyone else. I considered this accusation. Can you give me an example? Like right now. You're turning this whole conversation into some kind of interrogation where you make us look stupid. I'm asking questions to understand what you're upset about. How does that make you look stupid? See? There you go again, acting like you're some kind of lawyer or something. Acting like a lawyer. For wanting clarity and communication. For refusing to accept vague accusations without specific examples. Karen, I'm going to ask you a direct question, and I'd appreciate a direct answer. Do you believe that I think I'm better than you? She shifted uncomfortably in her seat. Sometimes it feels that way. That's not what I asked. Do you believe that I personally think that I'm a better person than you are? I don't know what you think. But you just accused me of acting superior. If you don't know what I think, how can you know how I act? My mother slammed her hand on the table, making the dishes jump. Stop it, Linda. Stop twisting everything around and making us sound like idiots. I'm not trying to make anyone sound like anything. I'm trying to understand why you called me dead weight. Because you are, she said, her voice rising with emotion. You take up space in this family, you demand attention and recognition, but you don't give anything back. Don't give anything back. The accusation hung in the air like smoke from a fire that was finally burning everything down. I reached into my purse and pulled out my phone, scrolling through my banking app until I found what I was looking for. Then I set the phone on the table where everyone could see the screen. This is my bank statement from the last 12 months, I said quietly. Would you like me to go through it line by line and show you everything I haven't given back to this family? My mother's face went even paler. Linda, don't. Don't what? Don't show them the truth. Dennis leaned forward to look at the phone screen, his face confused. What are we looking at? January 15th, I said, pointing to a line item. $500 to Dennis Miller. That was for your truck payment when you said you were between jobs. Dennis's face flushed. That was a loan. Was it because I don't remember you ever paying it back? February 3rd. $750 to Mom and Dad Hamilton. That was for the furnace repair. My father finally looked up, his face uncomfortable. We said we'd pay you back when we could. March 22nd, $400 to Karen Wilson. Emergency room visit for Tyler when he had pneumonia. Karen's voice was barely a whisper. I was going to pay you back. April 9th, $300 to Dennis Miller. Car insurance premium. I told you I was waiting for a job to start, Dennis said defensively. May 17th, $200 to Mom and Dad Hamilton. Property tax shortfall. I continued down the list, reading each transaction in a calm, steady voice. Dennis's truck registration. Karen's grocery money when Tom was laid off for 2 weeks. My parents' prescription co-pays when Dad's insurance changed. Dennis's job interview outfit. Karen's babysitter when she had to work extra shifts. With each item, the room grew quieter. Brenda looked mortified, clearly realizing she was witnessing something deeply personal and painful. Tom had actually put down his phone and was staring at the table. My nephew sensed the tension and began to fuss quietly in his high chair. "Should I continue?" I asked when I reached June. "Because we're only halfway through the year." "Stop," my mother said quietly. "Why I thought you wanted to know what I give back to this family. This isn't about money," she said desperately. "You're right. It's not about money. It's about respect. It's about recognition. It's about basic human decency between family members." I scrolled down further in my banking history. This doesn't include the groceries I've bought for family dinners, the gas money for all the trips home, the gifts for birthdays and holidays that no one else exchanges, the time I took off work to help Karen move when Tom hurt his back. Dennis was staring at the table, his face red with embarrassment and anger. "You didn't have to do any of that." "You're absolutely right. I didn't have to. I chose to because I thought that's what families do for each other. I thought that love was expressed through action, through being there when people need you." "It is," Karen said weakly. "Then why am I dead weight?" The question hung in the air unanswered. My mother opened her mouth several times, but no words came out. Dennis continued staring at the table. Karen had tears in her eyes but said nothing. "I want to understand the logic here," I continued. "I provide financial support when you need it, emotional support when you ask for it, practical help when you're struggling, and consistent presence at every family gathering for years. In return, you criticize my career, dismiss my achievements, mock my lifestyle choices, and call me dead weight you carry out of obligation." My father finally spoke, his voice gruff with discomfort. "Linda, families are complicated. We all say things we don't mean when we're upset." "Do we, Dad? Because this feels like something Mom has been thinking for a long time." I turned to look at my mother directly. "How long have you seen me as dead weight?" She couldn't meet my eyes. "I don't see you that way." "Then why did you say it?" I was frustrated. "About what?" "About your attitude." "What about my attitude frustrates you?" We were going in circles, but I could see that the repetition was wearing down their defenses. Each time they tried to redirect or deflect, I brought the conversation back to the central question. What had I actually done wrong besides succeed in building a life for myself? Dennis suddenly looked up, his face angry. "Fine. You want the truth? Yes. It bothers us that you act like you're better than us. Yes, it bothers us that you have money and we don't. Yes, it bothers us that you keep track of every dollar like some kind of bank. I don't keep track of every dollar. I keep track of my own money that I work hard to earn and choose to share with my family when they need help. But you do keep track. You just proved it with that phone. I keep records because I'm a responsible adult who monitors my finances. The same way you'd keep track if you loaned money to a friend." "We're not friends," Karen said suddenly. "We're family." "Exactly. You're my family. Which makes it even more painful that you see my financial responsibility as keeping score instead of recognizing it as evidence of how much I care about you." The conversation was spiraling into territory that felt both dangerous and necessary. Years of unspoken resentments were finally being dragged into the light, and the picture they revealed was uglier than I'd ever imagined. But I was no longer afraid of ugly truths. I was tired of pretending that this dysfunction was normal family dynamics. I was done protecting their feelings at the expense of my own dignity. "I have one more question," I said quietly. "If I'm dead weight that you carry out of obligation, what exactly would happen if you stopped carrying me?" The question seemed to hit them like a physical blow. My mother's face went from white to gray. Dennis actually pushed back from the table as if he needed space to process what I was asking. Karen started crying quietly, tears streaming down her face without sound. "You don't mean that," my mother whispered. "Don't I? You just told me I'm dead weight you carry out of obligation. I'm offering to relieve you of that burden." "Linda, you're being dramatic," my father said. but his voice lacked conviction. Am I? Let's think about this logically. If I'm dead weight, then removing that weight should make everyone's life easier. You won't have to pretend to care about my career anymore. You won't have to include me in family gatherings where my presence apparently makes everyone uncomfortable. You won't have to carry me anymore. I could see the wheels turning in their heads as they began to process the practical implications of what I was saying. No more emergency financial help. No more covering shortfalls in their budgets. No more backup plan when Dennis's business ventures failed or Karen faced unexpected expenses. But you'd also be giving up family, my mother said desperately. You'd be alone. Alone. The word that was supposed to scare me into submission. The threat that had kept me compliant for so many years. But as I sat there looking at these people who had just spent an entire evening criticizing and dismissing me alone, suddenly sounded like freedom. Would I be more alone than I am right now, sitting at a table with people who see me as a burden? Dennis finally found his voice. We don't see you as a burden. You literally just called me dead weight. Mom was upset. She didn't mean it. I turned to my mother. Did you mean it? She struggled with the question, her face cycling through emotions I couldn't read. Finally, she spoke in a voice barely above a whisper. I meant that sometimes it feels like you judge us. For what? For not being as successful as you are. There it was. The truth that had been lurking underneath all the accusations and resentment. They felt judged by my success because it highlighted their own failures and lack of progress. Have I ever said anything to make you feel judged? You don't have to say anything. It's obvious what you think. What do I think? That we're all losers who can't get our lives together. I stared at her, this woman who had raised me and supposedly loved me, and realized that she had created an entire narrative about my thoughts and feelings without ever asking me what they actually were. Mom, do you know what I think when I look at Dennis? She shook her head. I think about the time he spent 3 hours helping me move my couch when I first got my apartment. I think about how he taught me to drive stick shift in his truck when I was 16. I think about how he used to walk me to school when I was scared of the older kids. Dennis looked up, his face surprised. Do you know what I think when I look at Karen? Another headshake. I think about the sister who used to sneak into my room during thunderstorms. The one who made me friendship bracelets every summer. The one who cried when I left for college because she said the house would be too quiet without me. Karen's tears were flowing freely now. Do you know what I think when I look at you and Dad? My mother's voice was barely audible. What? I think about the parents who worked 2 jobs to keep us fed and housed. I think about Mom staying up all night when we were sick. I think about Dad teaching me to ride a bike and fixing my broken toys. I think about how hard you both worked to give us a stable home. The silence that followed was different from the previous silences. This one felt heavy with recognition and regret. Then why, my mother asked brokenly, does it feel like you don't need us anymore? And there it was, the real issue. Not that I thought I was better than them, but that my independence threatened their sense of purpose and control. I do need you, I said softly. I need you to be proud of me. I need you to celebrate my successes instead of treating them like threats. I need you to see my financial help as love instead of keeping score. I need you to understand that growing up doesn't mean growing away from family. But it feels like it does, Karen said through her tears. Only because you've decided that my success means I don't value you anymore. But that's not true. I've never missed a family gathering. I've never refused to help when you asked. I've never stopped calling or visiting or caring about what happens to all of you. Dennis wiped his eyes with his napkin. But you have changed. Of course I've changed. I'm 32 years old. I've grown and learned and built a career and a life. Did you expect me to stay exactly the same person I was at 18? No, but what? But it feels like you've outgrown us. I looked around the table at these people I'd loved my entire life, finally understanding the fear that had been driving their behavior. They were terrified that my success meant I didn't need them anymore, so they'd been trying to keep me small and dependent to maintain their sense of importance in my life. "I haven't outgrown you," I said quietly, "but I have outgrown being treated like a child who should be grateful for basic parental affection. I've outgrown being criticized for my achievements instead of celebrated for them. I've outgrown pretending that my financial contributions to this family are obligations instead of gifts." My father cleared his throat. "Linda, we never meant to make you feel unappreciated." "But you have. For years." "Then what do we do now?" My mother asked, her voice small and lost. I looked at her, this woman who had given me life, and then spent decades trying to diminish it, and felt something shift inside me. Not forgiveness exactly, but a recognition that she was operating from her own fears and limitations. "Now you decide whether you want a relationship with me as an adult, or whether you want to keep trying to maintain the illusion that I'm still the little girl who needed your permission to exist." "Of course we want a relationship with you," Dennis said quickly. "Then it has to be different. It has to be based on mutual respect instead of obligation. It has to include recognition of my achievements instead of resentment about them. It has to acknowledge that I contribute to this family instead of taking from it." Karen nodded eagerly. "We can do that. Can you? Because it means celebrating my promotions instead of calling them luck. It means asking about my work instead of dismissing it. It means saying thank you when I help instead of acting like I owe it to you." The request sounded simple, but I could see from their faces that they represented a fundamental shift in how this family had operated for decades. "What if we can't change?" my mother asked quietly. The question hung in the air between us, honest and vulnerable and terrifying. "Then I guess you'll find out what it really means to carry dead weight," I said, "because I won't be here to help anymore." The 6 months that followed that Thanksgiving dinner were the most difficult and transformative of my adult life. I left my parents' house that night feeling simultaneously liberated and devastated. For the first time in my life, I had spoken my complete truth to my family, and the aftermath was both exactly what I'd expected and nothing like I'd prepared for. The first few weeks were the hardest. My phone rang constantly with calls I didn't answer. Dennis left voicemails that ranged from angry to apologetic to desperate. Karen sent long text messages explaining why she'd acted the way she had, asking for forgiveness, promising things would be different. My mother oscillated between defensive justifications and tearful pleas for reconciliation. But I had meant what I said. I was done being the family's financial and emotional safety net while receiving nothing but criticism and resentment in return. For the first time in my adult life, I focused entirely on my own needs and goals. The change was remarkable. Without the constant drain of family drama and financial requests, I had energy I'd forgotten I possessed. I threw myself into my work with renewed focus, leading a campaign for a pediatric hospital that became a case study in successful healthcare marketing. My supervisor recommended me for a leadership development program that I'd been too overwhelmed to consider before. I also began dating seriously for the first time in years. Without the background noise of family dysfunction, I was able to recognize healthy relationship patterns and avoid the drama-filled connections I'd been unconsciously drawn to in the past. I met Marcus, a financial advisor with his own small practice, who treated my career achievements as evidence of intelligence and drive, rather than threats to his ego. But the most significant change was in my relationship with myself. Without constantly managing my family's emotions and crises, I discovered interests and passions I'd neglected for years. I took a ceramics class and found I had a natural talent for pottery. I joined a hiking group and spent weekends exploring state parks I'd never had time to visit. I read novels for pleasure instead of just professional development books. 3 months after Thanksgiving, Dennis showed up at my apartment unannounced. He looked thin and tired, and for a moment my old instinct to fix his problems kicked in automatically. but I caught myself and simply waited for him to explain why he was there. I lost my job, he said without preamble. The pool cleaning thing didn't work out, and now I can't make rent on the apartment I finally got. I felt a familiar tug of sympathy and obligation, but I also remembered his dismissive attitude toward my work and his comfortable assumption that my financial help was something he deserved rather than something he should appreciate. I'm sorry to hear that, I said. Have you talked to Mom and Dad about helping you? His face flushed. They can't help. Dad's hours got cut back, and they're already struggling. Of course they were struggling. Without my quiet financial contributions to cover emergencies and shortfalls, they were discovering what their actual budget looked like. What about Karen? Maybe she and Tom could help. Dennis laughed bitterly. Karen can barely keep her own head above water. Tom's still only working part-time. Have you considered a loan from a bank? Banks don't loan money to people with my credit history. I nodded sympathetically. That must be frustrating. We stood there in my apartment doorway, him waiting for me to offer help, and me waiting for him to either ask directly or leave. Finally, he broke. Linda, I need money. I know I was an ass at Thanksgiving, but I'm desperate here. How much do you need? Hope flickered in his eyes. $1,500 would cover rent and utilities for next month. That's a lot of money. I know, but I'm good for it. I've got some leads on jobs, and as soon as I get back on my feet, I'll pay you back. Some leads on jobs. The same promise he'd made every time he'd asked for money over the years, and the same promise that had never materialized into actual repayment. Dennis, do you remember what you said to me at Thanksgiving dinner? His face went red. I was upset. We all were. You said I had an easy job that anyone could do. You said I was lucky to find work that paid well for such simple tasks. I didn't mean it that way. How did you mean it? He struggled for words. I don't know. I was just frustrated. Frustrated about what? About everything. My life, my failures watching you succeed while I kept screwing up. The honesty surprised me. So you took your frustration out on me. Yeah, I guess I did. And now you want me to give you $1,500. I want you to help me the way family helps family. The way I've been helping you for years. He nodded eagerly. Exactly. But also while believing that my work is easy and my success is just luck. His face fell. Linda, I don't think that anymore. What changed your mind? Trying to live without your help changed my mind. Watching Mom and Dad struggle to pay bills changed my mind. Realizing how much you've been covering for all of us changed my mind. I studied his face, looking for signs of genuine understanding versus desperate manipulation. If I help you this time, what's going to be different? I'll pay you back. That's not what I meant. What's going to be different about how you see me and treat me? He thought about it for a long moment. I guess I need to start seeing you as a person instead of just my little sister who's supposed to help when I ask. It wasn't a perfect answer, but it was more self-awareness than he'd ever shown before. I'm not going to give you $1,500, I said. His face crumpled with disappointment and anger. Linda, please. I wouldn't ask if I wasn't desperate. But I'll loan you $800 with a written repayment plan and a promise that this is the last time I help you financially, unless you can demonstrate that you've made real changes in how you manage money and employment. He stared at me, processing the offer. You want me to sign something. I want us both to be clear about expectations so there's no confusion later. That seems kind of cold for family. Dennis, what seems cold to me is spending years helping you while being told that my work doesn't matter and my success is just luck. What seems cold is being called dead weight after providing financial support whenever you needed it. He winced. I'm sorry about that. We all are. Sorry enough to change how you treat me. Yes. Then prove it. Take the loan with clear terms, follow through on repayment, and start treating my career with the same respect you'd want for your own. He agreed, though I could see it cost him something to accept help with conditions attached. We drew up a simple repayment agreement, and I transferred the money to his account. But more importantly, he thanked me genuinely and asked about my work with what seemed like real interest. Similar conversations happened with other family members over the following months. Karen called crying about unexpected medical bills, and I helped her apply for a payment plan with the hospital instead of just covering the cost myself. My parents struggled with home repairs, and I researched contractors and financing options with them instead of simply writing a check. Each interaction required them to acknowledge my expertise and value instead of simply accepting my help as something they deserved. It was uncomfortable for everyone at first, but gradually it began to shift the entire dynamic of our relationships. The biggest change came from my mother. 4 months after our explosive dinner, she called and asked if she could come visit me. Not for money, not for help with a crisis, but because she wanted to see my life and understand who I'd become. She spent an entire Saturday in my apartment looking at my books and artwork meeting Marcus, when he stopped by asking detailed questions about my work projects and future goals. For the first time in my adult life, she seemed genuinely curious about me as a person, rather than frustrated by my failure to fit into her expectations. "I owe you an apology," she said as we sat on my couch drinking coffee. "I've been so afraid of losing you that I tried to keep you small and dependent. I thought if you needed us, you'd always come home." "I never stopped needing you," I said. "I just needed you differently than when I was a child." I couldn't see the difference. To me, independence looked like rejection. But it wasn't. It was growth. She nodded, tears in her eyes. "I know that now. Watching how much we all struggled without your help made me realize how much you've been holding this family together." I wasn't trying to hold anyone together. I was just trying to love you the best way I knew how. By fixing our problems instead of making us face them. It was a moment of clarity that surprised both of us. "Maybe we were both doing things wrong," I said. "Maybe. But I want to do better now." Today, almost a year after that devastating Thanksgiving dinner, my relationship with my family is fundamentally different. Not perfect, but honest in ways it never was before. Dennis is working steadily for the first time in years and has actually made 2 payments on his loan. Karen has enrolled in online classes to finish her degree and stopped asking me to solve problems she can handle herself. My parents have learned to manage their finances without my secret subsidies, and they've discovered they're more capable than they thought. Most importantly, they've learned to see my success as something to celebrate rather than something that threatens their sense of worth. When I was promoted to marketing director last month, my mother called to congratulate me and asked detailed questions about my new responsibilities. Dennis sent a card saying he was proud to have a sister who had worked so hard to achieve her goals. Karen posted about my promotion on social media, calling me an inspiration. The changes weren't immediate or easy. There were setbacks and arguments and moments when I wondered if I'd made a terrible mistake by forcing this confrontation. But gradually, we all learned new ways of relating to each other that were based on respect rather than obligation. Appreciation rather than resentment. I learned that setting boundaries doesn't mean cutting people off. It means defining what kind of treatment you're willing to accept and what kind of relationship you're willing to participate in. I learned that helping people can actually hurt them if it prevents them from developing their own coping skills and self-reliance. Most importantly, I learned that love shouldn't require you to make yourself smaller so others can feel bigger. My family learned that success isn't a limited resource. My achievements don't diminish their worth or potential. They learned that financial help is a gift, not an obligation, and that gifts should be received with gratitude rather than expectation. They learned that watching someone you love grow and succeed should feel like celebration, not competition. The most powerful lesson for all of us was understanding the difference between carrying someone and drowning with them. For years, I thought love meant absorbing their problems and emotions, taking responsibility for their failures and crises. I thought being needed meant being depleted. But real love means supporting people while they learn to support themselves. It means celebrating their growth rather than enabling their stagnation. It means believing in their capability to handle their own lives, rather than assuming they need you to handle things for them. Sometimes the people who call you dead weight are actually drowning and they're trying to pull you under with them. When you stop being their life preserver, you both learn to swim. When you stop accepting the role of family scapegoat, everyone has to take responsibility for their own behavior and choices. The relationship I have with my family now isn't the one I dreamed of as a child, but it's honest and sustainable in ways the old dynamic never was. We can enjoy each other's company without underlying resentment. We can offer help without creating dependency. We can express love without requiring sacrifice. I still have boundaries and I still enforce them. But they're no longer walls built from hurt and anger. They're healthy limits that protect all of us from falling back into patterns that serve no one well. If you're in a situation where your family sees your success as a threat, rather than a celebration where your help is expected rather than appreciated, where your growth is viewed as abandonment rather than natural development, I want you to know that change is possible. It requires courage to speak your truth, strength to maintain your boundaries, and patience to allow relationships to evolve into healthier forms. But it's worth it. Because you deserve to be seen and valued for who you really are, not diminished, so others can feel comfortable with who they've chosen to remain. Have you ever been in a family situation where your success created resentment instead of pride? How did you handle it? Let me know in the comments below. And if this story resonated with you, please hit that like button and subscribe for more real-life experiences about family dynamics, personal growth, and finding your voice in difficult relationships. Share this video with someone who might need to hear that their achievements matter and their boundaries are valid. Thank you for listening to my story, and remember that your worth isn't determined by how small you're willing to make yourself for others. You have the right to grow, succeed, and take up the space you've earned in this world.